Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
I always enjoy getting such good advice from you, Aaron, in pull request comments. You
Yeah.
never get frustrated or say, Joel, why would you ever do that? It's just constructive feedback. But I joke, but I was looking at a pull request recently, and I
Mhm.
thought it might make like the subject of the discussion might make for an interesting topic today because it was around testing. And well, it not really directly about testing. It was more about where to put logic. And really, I think your principle was to try to keep logic out of the blade view and try to keep it more in the controller action. So I'll set up the scenario and we can talk
Mhm.
through the specifics of it. And then I think it'll come back around to testing. That's kind of like what I took away from it. So in this particular case, I don't have to get too detailed with the requirements, but basically we wanted to show an alert on the page in a specific scenario, right? So in this particular case, if it was if we were looking at a page that had to do with a certain part of the country, then show this message that something had moved and where to find it, right? And so there was in the blade view, we used include when, which is a really nice little helper, and brought in a partial, passed in a message. It worked great. And what did you
Mhm.
say to that approach, Aaron? What was your feedback? Do you recall?
Yeah, I said, excellent, let's go.
Ship it.
No. So to fill in a little bit of context here, so that include when uh is a logical sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to look at stuff as very simplistic. If we're going to do ifs or control loops inside of a blade, it has to be the simplest version of something, right?
Okay.
And so, in order to do this custom message that would appear on this blade file, we have a couple different types of decisions that we can make that determine whether we're just going to show this message or not on the blade. The first one, and that include when, is probably some sort of logic where it was like, well, I mean, it was a state, so we're matching a
Right.
particular state.
Yep.
So if this object is in this state, then include when. So when that is true, do this. Okay, that makes sense. And then inside that partial was maybe the hard coded message or
Right.
something like that. Because it was just a special like one time off thing. It was going to be there for a while, but it was just like a one time sort of message.
Yeah, there was like an alert component, blade component we already had used,
Mhm.
which accepted a message. But you're right, the message we were passing into that component was
Okay.
hard coded
Yeah.
in the blade view as well.
Yeah, and so the one logical sort of thing that we have in our view was if something we know about our model or an attribute of our model is of a certain state or value, then do this thing.
Hmm.
And I find that interrogating the models specifically like that can be a little bit too much logical intensive, too much business knowledge even inside of our blade files. So in our blade, we want to actually display a view. We want to display things. We don't necessarily want to do too much logic. I mean, simple, very small ifs, like if this is there, then do
Yeah.
it. If there's a loop of these, then show a loop. But I
Hmm.
don't want to have complex sort of business related things. And I looked at this statement as, or as this message as more of like a business related thing. If it's, our business says if you're in this state, then you have to follow this sort of alert or whatever. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit more of a just a, hey, does this exist? Yes or no. It was something more specific. So
Right.
when I see something like that, I want to see that moved a little bit further up into an area where we deal with logic, like the controller.
Hmm. Right. And so in this case, it was a very simple change, but basically the conditional, are we in state X, moved out of the blade and up into the controller, and then it passed, and so it said if we're in state X, then the message equals XYZ, and pass that into the view. And so then we still had an include when in the view, but it was do we have a message or not? And if we don't have a message, don't show it. If we have a message, show it. And so it might seem like kind of splitting hairs, but your point is like business logic versus presentation logic. So the business logic is,
Mhm.
am I in state X? The presentation logic is, should I show a message or not? Right. And so
You're right.
I liked the suggestion. I think it might have been the first time you actually had a good constructive suggestion for me in a PR. Normally my code is so perfect, but it was a little treat for me. No.
Interesting.
But I want to talk about a secondary benefit too, because this might seem arbitrary. Like, who cares? If you have a little bit of business logic in a blade view, right? It's not going to break anything. Well,
Aaron cares.
Who cares?
Aaron
cares. Okay. But another side benefit, other than making Aaron happy, was testing. We typically like to test mainly, feature tests. And mainly there, we're looking at the controller and kind of side effects. But we don't go real heavy with blade tests, like assert C or assert, C text or things like that. We do it occasionally, but we try to avoid it just because it tends to be, I don't know, a little brittle. It's kind of a more verbose test. So in this case, I was actually able to do a much better test just looking at the controller and what it was passing to the view without having to make assertions about what the view was doing. And so I felt like that was another nice side effect that came out of that too.
Yeah, instead of rendering the view in that particular instance and seeing if you saw the message inside of it, you could just check the, a certain view has that message, or make sure it's not empty, or make sure there's a value in it.
Right.
I get that. Yeah. And I think the final sort of benefit, I want to wrap it up here real quick, is that the logic we had in that custom sort of message was based off of a state, but the placement of the message made sense if there was some sort of alert for that page, right? So it wasn't like hidden somewhere. It was right at the top. So it was a sort of place that you might put in an announcement anyway.
Yep.
And so by moving some of that logic out and just using that custom message sort of variable, now if we are in, let's say, a different state and there's a different message, we can, pass in a message, in that custom message. So we've now moved our logical stuff all into that one controller instead of having to write multiple ifs inside of that blade. Like, if there's this scenario, then display this message. If there's that scenario, display that message. Instead, we handle setting the message in the controller, and the blade is much simpler. It says, if there's a message, I'll show it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Another benefit.
So I'm of the age that I kind of grew up with like grunge music and, and then Korn and like those sort of like new metal rock and stuff. And so I always had like a little soft spot for them, but that's when you're 18, you're 20, 25, whatever. And time goes on, music changes and whatever. And like, I'm preparing myself for those to be called oldies.
Oh boy.
Or like, because I mean, when you think about it, like the oldies that we grew up with were just our parents' music.
Yeah, like
or
Led
not
Zeppelin.
oldies, but like,
right.
yeah. So, I don't really think about this too much, but the other day I was in a local coffee shop and I'm listening to it, and it's the edited version. So, I'm listening to some music and it's playing in the background. So I'll say the edited version, but it was really slow, sort of relaxing. And it was like, I wanna you like an animal.
What?
And I was like, what is going on? Why does this sound so familiar? Turns out it was like a slow version of a Nine Inch Nails song playing in a coffee shop. And I was like, what is going on here? This used to be like the crazy music that we listened to as kids and our parents hated or whatever. Now it's the background music inside of a coffee shop.
So it's like the smooth jazz version of the song?
Yeah, well, it was like not even smooth. It was like how like folk singers like do covers of stuff. So it was like, just so super slow. And I'm like, what? And people are just sitting around. I'm like, does anyone notice this? And I mentioned it to the barista, who's also the owner, and he was like, yeah. He goes, it's my favorite playlist. he knew what he was doing.
Well, I'm going to keep an ear out to next time I'm in an elevator to see if like there's like a Korn version of music in the background.
Oh, it'll be like Juvenile back that thing up,
right?
But playing in an elevator. Yep. Not everyone likes a podcast. Maybe you just stumbled here by accident. Maybe YouTube's more your thing.
If you want to check out our YouTube channel, head over to masteringlaravel.io. Down in the footer, click that YouTube link.